Okie dokie. So, welcome to the September 12th call of the Restoration RoundTable. Howdy, Rebels. Good to see you. We have a great topic ahead of us. Morris has put in a week or two of prep to talk about O&P, profit and loss, and all things that go into running a business. We're excited. That was a very excited gesture there, Jason. I appreciate that. So we're excited to hear what he has to say and answer any questions you guys have. I'm going to black out my screen and go mute for a bit while we get started on that because I've got some things behind the scenes to do. We're kind of doing a team effort here, but if you guys need anything, I am here. And with that, Morris, the show is yours, man.
Okay. So I'm going to preface my comments with what I'm talking about today is not meant to say this is the right way to do things or the wrong way to do things. It is a way to look at things. And so we've had a lot of conversations repeatedly on Restoration Rebels and other restoration websites or pages. I hear people talk about in relation to O&P, you're being greedy. You shouldn't charge for that. You're making enough profit. It's not necessary. And it just kind of, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, so to speak, because I don't know that everyone understands why you need to be billing for O&P and why it's important to your business. And so we're just going to have a brief discussion about P&Ls and overhead and that kind of stuff. So I prepared a small spreadsheet that I'll bring up here. So I created an example here. This is a fictitious, let's call it P&L for a company. Of course, it doesn't have all the different line items for a P&L. And I'll say for the folks that are watching on Facebook, if you don't have accounting software of some sort, even if it's QuickBooks, it's $20 a month to rent, I highly recommend that you have some kind of accounting software that you're using. If you're not following your numbers, you really don't know how you're doing as a business. And this will actually be a good example for something like that. So in this fictitious company, they're making $50,000 a month in gross revenue. Gross revenue is sometimes referred to as top line revenue. Basically, it's all the money that comes in the door before a single penny is taken out. Now, we're going to assume that it's 5 jobs per month this company's doing that's leading to $50,000 in gross revenue. I've got here 8.5% sales tax. In some accounting packages that run on an accrual basis, that sales tax, when you collect it, is not included in your gross revenue. So just for folks that are saying, well, you shouldn't include sales tax receipts with gross revenue because it's not really yours, it's going to the state. I get that. Some packages will sort of separate it out from your gross revenue. Other packages will include it in your gross revenue, and then you just have to write a check and it shows up as an expense item on your P&L. So we start with 50 grand, 42.5 comes off the top for the state sales tax. Then we've got cost of goods sold. So we hear a lot about 40% cost of goods sold is the target you should be shooting for, 40% or better. Cost of goods sold, what that means is cost of goods sold includes things like the direct labor hours. If you have 2 technicians or 4 technicians working, the hourly rate you're paying them, that's part of the cost of goods sold. If you have to buy 6 mil poly or tape or HEPA filters to work on those specific jobs, that's part of cost of goods sold. So once we start with the gross revenue and we remove cost of goods sold, that leads us to gross profit. So this particular company started with $50,000 a month in income, and after we do a 40% cost of goods sold and take out the sales tax, this business owner has $25,750 left. I'm not sure if we're still streaming. Select go live. I think we are.
You are still live.
I'm still live, okay, because it went away on my side. Thank you. So this company starts with 50 grand and they lose pretty much half of their gross revenue to COGS and taxes right off the top. So now he's left with $25,750 to now cover his overhead. So what is overhead, you might ask? Overhead are all the items that a business has to pay for that are not directly related to the specific job. And so here I've got some examples. For example, franchise, you're doing a royalty payment each month. Let's say that's 10%. That's a pretty stiff overhead, but it's not unusual to have anywhere between 8, 12, 14% royalty rates for some of our restoration companies. This person's also paying insurance, auto insurance, business insurance, health insurance, etc. I just made one category. On a true P&L, you'd have each different insurance broken out. But for our purposes, insurances, $750. You've got phones, internet connectivity. You probably have a bookkeeper managing your books for you. Marketing. One of the measurements I've often heard is you should spend 10% of your gross revenue on marketing. This particular company is spending $3,000, which is less than 10% of their gross revenue for this particular month. Your marketing budget may be larger, may be smaller. It really just depends on where you are. Marketing things like Yelp, things like Home Advisor. Perhaps you're sponsoring golf outings. Anything that goes into marketing would fall in under that. Maybe you're leasing a truck.
Here's what I found.
Whoops. Maybe you're leasing a truck. Maybe you're renting a warehouse, renting an office space. Gas and oil, $600. Equipment lease, Xactimate, maybe. Now, salaries. Some people would say, well, wait a minute. Salary is 10 grand. Okay, so we've taken out the direct costs of the labor for doing each individual job. However, if you've got people that are coming to the office and they're not actually on a job 8 hours a day, every day, that's not a direct cost. If you're the owner of the business, you've got to eat, your spouse has to eat, so you're going to have to take money out as a salary. On a detailed P&L, that might be listed as executive salaries. Maybe you have somebody answering the phones. Maybe you have someone, who knows, whatever. Look, let's just say all the employee labor costs that are not directly related to the billable hours I've captured here under salaries. 10,000, that may be the right number for this fictitious company. It may be a little high, it may be a little low. Each company is different. Maybe buy some equipment each month, vehicle maintenance, bank fees. Bank fees, people will often say, well, wait a minute. Wells Fargo doesn't charge me $1,000 a month. Well, in that you do have checking account fees and check fees and stuff like that, but the big driver for that one will be credit cards. If you take credit cards, your credit card processor is probably charging you anywhere between 3% and 5% fees on every credit card charge you take. So for the purposes of this conversation, I said I'm going to assume 2% because you're not going to do a credit card for the whole 50,000, but let's say 2% of the whole 50,000 comes out to be a decent, measurement or a decent number. Dues and associations, maybe you're in a B&I group, maybe you have Office, maybe you have some other, Microsoft Office where you pay a monthly fee. Maybe you have voice over IP phones where you pay a monthly fee. maybe the Rotary Club, you name it, whatever. A little bit of postage, office supplies, etc. So, summing that all up, we started with 50,000. Then after cost of goods sold and sales tax, we landed at 25,000. Now we've got all of this overhead, which totals 23,000 in this scenario. That leaves this business owner with a profit of $2,150. Now that's better than negative, but that's not really what I would consider a huge profit on $50,000 worth of sales. Everyone's business is different. Some will have more overhead, some will have less overhead. So I think when people start talking about why are you charging O&P, why is it worth fighting for, why is it so important, it's because they're looking at the gross profit. They're like, well, I only had 2 guys out there for 4 days. I'm only paying them $15 an hour, so I made plenty of money. Not really when you add all the other things that you're paying every month that goes into keeping your doors open and running your business. It's another $23,600 in overhead expenses. So, one way to look at this when you're trying to determine how do I recoup that overhead, that big 23,600 number. Well, you could take 23,600, which is your monthly overhead, and it might vary a little bit more, a little bit less each month. But let's say it averages at 23,600. You could divide that by the number of jobs you have in an average month. And what I did here was divided that 23,600 over the 5 assumed jobs, which probably should have been a higher number, but let's say we assume 5 jobs. That means if we're going to divide that 23,600 over the jobs we have, each job needs to have $4,720 of additional overhead covered in order to cover our overhead, if you follow what I'm saying. That doesn't even account for profit. But sometimes people ask, well, I don't really know how to determine what percentage I need to charge for O&P, or what percentage I need to charge for just the overhead. This is one way to do it. Figure out what your monthly overhead is, divide it by the average number of jobs you have in a month, and that's how much overhead you should be getting on each job. That's how much overhead you might try to get to cover your operating expenses. Now, of course, we always have to take into account prevailing wages, market conditions. Are you in a market where there's only 2 restoration companies, so you can charge higher, or are you in a market where there's 100 restoration companies and guys standing outside a Home Depot willing to come and tear out mold with a handkerchief over their nose? Increasing your prices to a point where you don't get the job doesn't help the business, it doesn't help anyone. But my goal here was to show everybody and remind them it's not just gross profit, it's not just cost of goods sold that you have to cover. You need to cover all your operating expenses, which is called overhead. This is a way you could determine how much overhead you need to bill on each job. Now, these down here is just an example of if we had charged overhead or overhead and profit, however you want to do it, and you can, do 12% overhead and 15% profit or whatever mix you want. It doesn't have to be 10 and 10. There are some guys that charge 30% O&P. It really depends on what you need and what your market will bear. But just if we had charged 10% overhead and profit on this one company on their jobs, it would have made an additional $5,000. So now their net profit would have been $7,150. If they did the 20% overhead and profit, well, now their net profit for that month would have been $12,150. $12,150 in profit on a $50,000 month is a lot more appealing than $2,150. Plus, it lets you really cover your true expenses. So it's not just about, oh, well, I want to make this much money, or I need this much. It's really, okay, what are your actual overhead costs that you have to cover? if you're a business and you're not covering your overhead, you're not going to be in business for very long. So once you determine what it is you need to cover the overhead, then you can play with what you need to make in terms of profit for the P portion of overhead and profit. I tried to make this really basic. I know, a lot of you guys that are on the call already know some of this stuff, but I think some of the folks that are watching on Facebook may or may not. And so I would strongly encourage anyone that's watching to, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to drop me an instant message or anything like that. So with that, does anyone have any questions? Comments, concerns? Morris, you're absolutely wrong type stuff.
No, that's good. Does anybody take in consideration the risk that this business is? I mean, you take doctors, specialty doctors, stuff like that are high risk in what they're doing in operations. They charge more. We have a lot of risk in our industry here for making sure we have all the mold out. No one's going to get sick. Water's dried. Structures are dry. No mold's going to grow. Yada, yada, yada. Now, to me, we're all an additional risk, which requires additional reward. So I think it's an individual cost or price that you have to put onto that price tag, but it should be put into consideration. We're not normal contractors here. We are specialty.
And it's not only the risk. So if you think about it, I didn't include the equipment, the sunk costs for all the equipment we buy. We're a really hardware intensive business. And so if a guy drops $20,000 on equipment, dehumidifiers, air movers, air scrubbers, well, yeah, you spent the 20 grand up front, but you can't just say, oh, I already paid for that, I don't need to charge for it. If you took a loan from a bank to lease that equipment, you're going to have to make monthly payments on it. And so when we invest in equipment, we should expect to see a monthly return on all of our equipment. And that's not just scrubbers and dehumidifiers and fans. It should be vehicles as well. If you rent a box truck, if you purchase a box truck, or even if you rent it, you've got to get money back to cover the cost of purchasing that box truck or van, or the cost of renting it on a daily or monthly basis. So all of that needs to be covered.
How many here have everything broke out? I mean, QuickBooks is probably the most common software that's being used, but if you are using it or whatever program you are using, all these categories should be broke out so you know what you're making on each and every job, what you're spending on materials. I mean, Jason, how are you doing yours?
That's okay, we'll wait, Jason. Hey, I'll unmute you.
Or Rick or Thomas, I mean, you just get started. What do you do with yours?
Repeat.
I hired an accountant, but I just fired her, so I'm trying to find a new one. I didn't have a P&L report. It just a lump sum of money that didn't make sense. So,
Well, if you need a guy, I'll be happy to make a referral for you to a guy that's down in Houston that does my bookkeeping and a couple other restoration companies. He knows what he's doing and he knows the business. Just let me know.
When you guys are calculating out your margins on your individual jobs, are you guys applying a labor burden for every hour of time that's applied on a job? That's calculated based on the your overhead costs?
Well, I'm not clear 100% what you mean by that. So if I have a guy working on a job and it's, 2 guys, 8 hours, that's 16 man hours. So that's directed, that's direct cost.
Yeah. So example, you have a guy working on a job, $15 an hour. obviously the $15 an hour isn't his true cost, because you have not only his labor costs of employment, but you have your indirect costs as well. Are you calculating that on a per job basis, or are you just waiting until you get to the P&L?
Yeah, I'm not, but most of my guys are 1099s also. So,
Yeah.
it's a lot simpler. But even there's only, from what I've seen, for a small to mid-sized business, it's only so much you can do to allocate costs to each job. For example, my franchise guys tell me, hey, you know what? You need to be able to say how much tape you used on a job, what was the cost of the tape, what was the cost of this filter, the cost of the encapsulant. But you know what? I buy 2 cases of tape at the beginning of the month. I buy, encapsulant 10 gallons a month. I don't know if I used a half a quart of encapsulant on a particular job, and how much do I charge for that, or allocate, how much cost do I allocate
And
for that?
that's my question, because it costs more to keep track of how many rolls of tape in a lot of cases
Right.
than you can bill out. But if it was calculated over as a blended margin percentage as part of the labor burden, then it would automatically count, because some things can do that.
Mm-hmm.
I know QuickBooks can't, but I know like Sage ERP can. So there's different accounting packages that can and cannot do it, where they every hour labor that goes in there, there's automatically a burden percentage that's put on there as the cost before it calculates margin.
And then it varies what goes into making up all of that, right? I mean, some guys, there's going to be healthcare, dental care.
Exactly.
But like, to your point, you could add your tape and all the other items into that blended rate too. So.
Yeah, because I've seen some people where they just do the health benefits and employment taxes, things like that. But then I've seen other people where they take the actual labor burden, but they also take the overhead burden, split it out by the jobs, and it's applied on a percentage basis.
Mm.
This way they're not wasting the time to say, yeah, we used 4 pieces of tape today. They're doing it, but they're still capturing that on their margins, especially if they're commissioning out there, providing a commission to their project managers.
Mm.
So one thing I do is things we have to keep in stock: tape, plywood, 2x4s, 2x6s, things we have to keep in stock. When we purchase those items, I'll come back with a receipt, check in my QuickBooks of what it was last time. If it's increased, I'll increase it, but then I add 30 to 35% to that for a stocking fee, because that's basically money sitting on a shelf waiting to be used. They're not going to use it today. Might be a week, 2 weeks, a month from now.
Wait, what do you mean add 30, 35% to it for a stocking fee? I didn't understand that part.
So if, for instance, we do a lot of fires, we do board ups. So I'll buy a whole skid of OSB, 1/2-inch OSB, 7/16. That might run me $800-900 to buy that whole skid. So we'll add 30% to that. I'll figure out what it is per sheet,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll add about 30% to that.
Mark it up, right?
Mark it up and put it into my QuickBooks. But I also have a record of what I paid for it, so I know at the time what I did pay for it. So that's, like I said, that could have been money I could have had in the bank, but obviously I got it sitting out here in inventory, so I need to charge for that.
Yeah, and I've seen people do it that way, where things like the gloves, the tape, things like that, they put as a burden on the labor, because typically you have to have labor to do that. And then things like 2x4s, plywood and stuff that you would use on things like board ups, where it's not necessarily every job, but it actually gets allocated with a markup like you're doing, as basically as if you would the job's buying it from you.
And
So
the other thing I do on my labor, we're trying to do it, and I think it's been working about right. This is just a rule of thumb. This is what I've been doing. But if I'm paying somebody $20 an hour, I need to be charging $60, because that $40 is going to cover their benefits and money to be made for me on them. That seems to be about a good good point to be at, is right around there.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that if someone's paying, it's a minimum of 50% of whatever you charge out will be their wage. The rest is cost.
Can I add
So
something?
even just having those guys sitting around when they're idle, when they're not on a job, you're still paying them. And people sometimes forget that.
Yep.
All right, as far as job costs, can I add something?
Sure.
Well, what I do is whatever, if it's a job, $10,000 job, take a percentage of that, put it towards your consumables. That's it. Now, if you have to buy something extraordinary, that's a different deal. But just regular gloves and tape and all this stuff you guys are talking about, that's the percentage of every job. Figure out your percentage.
Yeah, and that's the labor overhead and combination that I was referring to, where the small items
Well,
like that
it's
would be
a-
part of the percentage. You're
Right,
doing
but
it on every single job you're calculating, or?
Yes, yes. But labor, I know T-sheets tell you exactly how much labor you have on the job. But if I got a $10,000 job, I know X amount percent is allocated for consumables. We also do it for gas too, gasoline for the vehicles. It's
One
pretty
thing-
simple.
Yeah, one thing I do on that is we add a 3% consumable charge
There
to
you go. There you go.
the total bill. So that captures those things in there. So there's a separate line item, stays right on the consumables. And it may be
I like
gloves, maybe dehumidifier filters. And air scrubber filters, no, that's too expensive. That's a separate line item for that. But
We're billing for that individually anyway. So
yeah,
You don't bill for your DH filters, but you do for the air scrubbers. You don't bill for both, Bob?
yeah, I bill for both. So the 3% consumables falls under that'd be like the filters for the humidifiers, but the air scrubbers, that's a separate charge and what I have is one complete charge for replacement of the filters and the time to take them out and replace them and dispose of them. It's all inclusive in that.
Yeah,
It spells
there's
it
a
out.
line. Yeah, the line item includes both if you're doing cleanup.
Yeah,
and it's all for a lot of people.
And that's the difference between a $180 HEPA air scrubber filter and an $8 DU filter, right? You can do 3% for the DU filter. So
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And the same with just a little, saw blades, just, chalk line, just little things that you normally overlook that 3% captures. Maybe regular vacuum bags, not the HEPA filters, but the
Right.
vacuum bags, stuff like that. That's where that 3% will come in. Garbage bags, instead of individually counting them, we'll just put it under that as consumables, and it actually works in our favor quite a bit.
And I think one thing worth pointing out, Bob, you don't use Xactimate, right?
Correct. I don't use Xactimate. It's all T&M.
Right.
Time and materials and everything we do.
So for the folks that may be watching and are using Xactimate,
Like Morris froze.
All right. For those that aren't listening, we don't use Xactimate. We use time and materials. Everything is captured from the time the door goes up in the shop to the door comes back down. The trucks are restocked and refinished. And that's how we do that. We've done it with multiple insurance companies. At first, they didn't like it, but that's just the way it is. Nobody's policy says that you have to use Xactimate to settle a claim. That's just bottom line right there. So it works very well for us. We capture everything. We don't lose anything. If traffic is bad or whatever it may be, we're capturing that time. We charge, our workers are getting paid when they're sitting in the truck and they're on the job site until we come back. It's the way it should be.
Sorry about that. My computer was locked up. I had to restart it.
Okay, what was your question, Morris?
I don't really recall. Oh, I was saying, so you're not using Xactimate. So a lot of times folks that may be watching, before they start thinking about adding that 3%, remember that things like tape and filters may be included in your Xactimate line items. So 3% or whatever percentage might not be ideal for the folks using Xactimate. That was my only point. I didn't hear you. Crap. Can anybody hear me?
Yep.
Oh,
I got
okay. Bob, you went away. That's what it was. I was like, huh? You're muted now.
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah, you went away.
I feel that Xactimate does the line items because they're hoping that you're not going to remember everything that's going to be there. Where time and materials, it doesn't matter. However long it takes me, the guys get paid the same. I don't care if we're doing demo, if we're doing water, we're doing mold is obviously more. When you do a suit up, we're charging more for that. But anything else is all captured at the same time. And I don't really care how many square feet or how many linear feet of trim, because we don't need to have that. We're working by the hour. Simpler, cleaner, and you capture and everything when you do the billing like that.
Yeah, I can see where it works.
Actually, Chuck Violan, we had a discussion about that at one time, and he's a great mastermind on knowing your numbers and profit. And he agrees 100% that you will capture more and be more productive and more profitable by doing time and materials than you would with Xactimate or anything else.
So when you say time and materials, do you just charge a flat labor rate per hour and then all of the other items like Tyvek and suits and respirators and cartridges are the materials, or is that included in your hourly rate?
They are all charged separately. So we have an hourly rate, we have equipment rates, we have the suit up rate, our suit up charges, filter charges, decon charges, like I said, the consumables, and we do the overhead and the profit. And we actually spell it out in our bill what overheads are for. So a lot of people just put 10% over a 10% profit. That throws up red flags. They want to fight you right away. Or if you actually have it spelled out, this is for computer paper, vehicles, insurances, things that are not captured. I think that would go a lot farther. And on the profit side, is it states it right in my bill. It's 10% to grow my business. I put it in there on that, and I think it's more reasonable where they're going to swallow a little easier. But it is what it is. We have all our clients sign a price list before we even start, so they know exactly what our hourly rates are, what our equipment costs are, and they can see it from day one going forward. And if there is a problem later on, I mean, here's the signed contract, here's a signed price list, and we also have them sign on a daily basis, initial actually, on what we did on their job site for that day, if they're available. If they're not, we catch them the next time we're there. So we track it from day one to the finish, then finish up with a certificate of completion. So it's a very clear picture from start to finish.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any other interesting items that they want to cover that we talked about this week on the Facebook page, maybe? I will say I went to Clark's training in wrong one, sorry. Clark's training in Austin, Texas, and it was pretty good. It was only a half a day, but there was quite a bit of value in it. It covered a lot of how to bill without using Xactimate. And I think we went over 3 different items. One was using spreadsheet, and then there were 2 other applications that he showed us where you could, basically do sketches and line items and such. That's similar to Xactimate, but not really the same. You created your own line items, you uploaded your own price lists, etc. One of the other things that stood out from his training was that we covered how to do estimating on water mitigation jobs. So generally, a lot of guys, they just sort of go in there, get the work authorization, and start working, just because that's the way it's been done for the longest period of time. But he showed us a spreadsheet he has that essentially you say, yeah, it's going to probably take 4 days. We're going to have 3 air scrubbers, or 1 air scrubber, 3 air movers, a DHU, and you just check off the boxes. And at the end, it spits out a number for you that you can then give to the client. And the spreadsheet's so handy, you can do it there on a tablet, go out to the truck, fill it out, check the check boxes, and then come in and have the client see the number and sign off on it, in 10 minutes. So it's a lot quicker, and it lets guys get started right away, and it lets the client have an actual estimate number to keep in mind. So I highly recommend it. If there are any more classes, I think there's 1 or 2 classes left, I'm not sure, but if anybody has a chance to go, it was definitely worthwhile.
So, Morris, what do you use right now
For what?
for your billing?
For billing, I use QuickBooks. For estimating, I use Xactimate. And I say it like that for a specific reason. When I first started, I did like a lot of guys do. We use Xactimate, we create an estimate, and then we adjust the estimate when the job is over, and we send that same estimate, the report, to the customer or the insurance company for payment. The detailed final report. And we expect them to pay off of that. The problem with that is when you send them that Xactimate sheet, it says estimate right on top of it. And so they believe that it's an estimate, not a final invoice. So they want to sort of wheel and deal and have conversations and try to cut your bill and stuff. Also, if you're using Xactimate for billing, they can also look at your Xactimate, then recreate it in their Xactimate, and they'll be able to say, hey, why is your demo pickup dump fee $186, and our Xactimate says it should be $90? So again, it creates all kinds of issues. So I use Xactimate specifically for building the estimate. I will massage the prices as I need them to be. And then if it's an insurance job, I will then take those line items out of Xactimate and create a QuickBooks estimate, and then send that estimate off to the client so he can provide it to the insurance company. And it's literally as simple as copying and pasting the line items from the Xactimate sketch to the QuickBooks invoice, adding in the quantities and the price per unit, and just sending it off. And that's really worked well for me since I started doing that. So Xactimate for estimating, QuickBooks for billing.
So I eliminated obviously, I eliminated the Xactimate, but we just preloaded everything into QuickBooks, all the prices on everything we have.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go to a job site, we make those little notes and have the owner sign off what we did for the day. We've kept track of our hours from start to finish, what the equipment we put there. And I'll come back at the end of the day, and all I got to do is open it up, start a new, for a new customer, and then just click on it. And like I said, it's all preloaded with dehumidifiers, air movers, air scrubbers, filters, decon, all that stuff is in there. I think I got about 180 different items in there, and that covers everything on fire, water, and mold.
Loaded into QuickBooks, right?
All loaded into QuickBooks.
My bookkeeper's been talking to me about it for a while, and I've been hesitant only because I wanted to do Clark's class first, so I had a really more sound understanding of what I'm going to be doing, why, and how. But I think I'm going to move in that direction as well. My estimate licensing expired last month, and it was time to sign up for another 12 months. And instead of doing 12 months, I just signed up for a month until I can do the migration. So I'm still planning on that.
Yeah, that you'll find it a lot faster, and it's just one. Obviously, you're going to save money because you don't have the QuickBooks anymore or Xactimate anymore. But you're going to find this a lot faster if you just have a cheat sheet with you and mark in what you use for equipment. You know your times that you spent going out into the field, coming back and reloading your truck. That's easy to capture, and you can have an estimate put there, not an estimate, but an invoice put together within minutes. It doesn't really take anything, and you don't really need. We have not drawn anything in years now.
Are you using the desktop version of QuickBooks?
Yes, Pro version.
When the items you're talking about the actual item list, then, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And we use the Pro version, so now we can break out when we get into it. Is it going to be a fire job? Is it going to be a mold job? It has categories set up, so then we know at the end of the year or the end of the month, whatever, where we made the most money. Was it a water job or was it a fire job? You know?
Using classes for that? The classes feature?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm never one to sort of force the conversation. So if no one has anything else that they'd like to chat about, you might consider calling it a wrap for this evening.
Morris, you did such a good job.
Oh, thank you.
You're hired.
Well, hopefully somebody gets some value out of it.
No, that was good. We don't use Xactimate at my company either, for whatever it's worth. We do the exact same thing Morris does. We bill T&M right through QuickBooks. It's been a fun change. So if we're done, then I'm going to stop the recording and let you guys all go. And we clocked this for a solid hour. So you guys did a good job.
Okay.
Great time in Greece.
Yes. Thank you.
If it makes you feel any better, I've gotten 0 packing done since you guys have been on the phone.
All right, now everybody, you guys have a good evening. We'll see you.
All right, you guys have a good night.